That morning, no one expected a single act of defiance to change military history. What began as routine training became a moment every soldier on base would remember, and one that would test the difference between following orders and doing what's right. The sun crested the horizon over Fort Bragg, casting long shadows across the dew-kissed parade ground. Sergeant Elena Vasquez stood at attention with her unit, the 82nd Airborne's medical detachment, their boots aligned in perfect rows on the damp asphalt. The air carried the sharp scent of wet earth and distant pine, mingling with the faint metallic tang of gun oil from the rifles slung at their sides. Captain Harlan's voice cut through the morning chill like a blade, crisp and unyielding. "Platoon! Attention!" Footsteps echoed in unison as the formation snapped tighter, every soldier's gaze fixed forward, breaths measured and silent. Elena, at 32, had served 8 years in the army, her dark hair pulled into a regulation bun beneath her patrol cap. She was the lead combat medic for Bravo Company, known for her steady hands in the field and her unerring calm under pressure. To her left stood Private Ramirez, a fresh-faced recruit still adjusting to the rhythm of Reveille, and to her right, Corporal Hayes, who had shared foxholes with her from basic training onward. The routine was sacred here, PT at dawn, followed by weapons quals and medical drills. It was the backbone of their world, a chain of command forged in discipline, where orders flowed downward like gravity, and loyalty upward was non-negotiable. "Medic Vasquez," Captain Harlan called, his eyes scanning the line. "Report for K9 integration exercise." Elena stepped forward without hesitation, her combat boots thudding softly against the ground. She saluted, palm crisp against her brow. "Sir, ready." Harlan nodded, gesturing toward the edge of the field, where Sergeant Mills waited with his handler team. The K9 unit was a recent addition to their joint ops training, Belgian Malinois dogs bred for detection and patrol, their handlers an extension of the infantry's senses. Elena's role today was to simulate field triage alongside the dogs, assessing mock casualties while the animals cleared perimeters for threats. As she approached, the lead dog, Rex, a sleek, black and tan male with ears pricked high, sat alert beside his handler, Specialist Torres. Rex's coat gleamed in the early light, still carrying the faint musk of last night's kennel straw. Torres gave a subtle nod to Elena, their bond with the animals unspoken but profound. "He's tuned in," Torres murmured, clipping Rex's leash. "One wrong scent and he's on it." Elena crouched briefly to meet Rex's gaze, her gloved hand hovering near his muzzle without touching, respect for the working animal's space. In her years as a medic, she'd seen how these dogs became lifelines, sniffing out IEDs or hidden wounds before humans could. Her own loyalty mirrored that, to the team, to the mission, to the oath she'd sworn. The drill commenced with precision. Captain Harlan's whistle pierced the air, and the platoon fanned out across the mock village setup, cardboard structures mimicking urban terrain, scattered with simulated debris. "Clear the sector," Harlan barked over the radio, static crackling in their earpieces. Elena moved with Hayes and Ramirez, her medical kit slung over one shoulder, the weight familiar and reassuring. Rex led point, nose low to the ground, his paws silent on the packed dirt. The wind picked up, rustling the canvas tarps that served as building facades, carrying the low hum of a distant Black Hawk warming up on the helipad. Halfway through the exercise, the disruption came quietly, almost imperceptibly. They reached the central compound, where actors posed as civilians in distress, part of the scenario to test non-combatant extraction. One figure, a young woman with a simulated leg wound, lay propped against a wall, her cries muffled for realism. Elena knelt to assess, her fingers probing the prop bandage, voice steady. "Ma'am, stay with me. What's your name?" But as Rex circled the area, his handler Torres froze. The dog's hackles rose, a low rumble building in his throat, not the alert for explosives, but something deeper, instinctive. "Contact," Torres reported into his radio, voice low. "Rex has a fix on the structure." Captain Harlan approached, brow furrowed, his boots crunching gravel. "Negative on threats, Specialist. Resume patrol." But Rex strained against the leash, whining softly, his nose buried in a shadowed corner where a small form huddled, a child actor no more than 8, overlooked in the setup. The girl, wide-eyed with stage fright, clutched a rag doll, her small frame trembling not from the drill but from the unfamiliar chaos. Elena glanced up, her medic's instincts overriding the script. "Sir, the child's unsecured. She's not cleared for the perimeter." Harlan's jaw tightened. "It's a simulation, Vasquez. Actors know the risks. Focus on the primary." The order hung in the air, heavy as the humid dawn. Elena hesitated, her hand midway to her kit, watching Rex nudge closer to the girl, his tail low in concern rather than aggression. The dog's empathy was legendary among handlers, sensing fear like a sixth sense. Torres shot Elena a look, silent solidarity in his eyes. The platoon paused, radios buzzing with updates from other sectors. Private Ramirez shifted uneasily beside her, whispering, "Sarge, she's just a kid. What if—" Elena cut him off with a sharp glance, but inside the moral fault line cracked. Orders were clear: maintain formation, complete the objective. Yet compassion tugged, raw and human, in the quiet space before Harlan's next command. The girl's eyes met Elena's across the yard, pleading without words, and in that moment the routine fractured. Elena rose slowly, her decision forming like a shadow in the rising sun. Harlan's voice sharpened. "Vasquez, stand down, that's an order." The wind whispered through the tents, carrying the distant bark of another K9 as the base held its breath. What followed would echo through inquiries and after-action reports, a single medic's choice rippling outward, challenging the unyielding line between duty and the fragile pulse of life it was meant to protect. The exercise ground to a halt, handlers recalling their dogs, the platoon reforming under Harlan's watchful eye. Elena stood at ease, but her mind raced, protocol versus the girl's unspoken trust, Rex's alert a mirror to her own conscience. Back at the barracks that afternoon, as the sun baked the concrete, whispers spread among the ranks. "Heard Vasquez almost broke formation," Ramirez muttered to Hayes over MREs in the mess tent. Hayes nodded, forking his chili mac. "She's got that look, like she sees more than the op." Elena sat alone at a corner table, her journal open but untouched, the scent of institutional coffee grounding her. She'd never questioned an order before, not in deployments to dusty outposts where the line between ally and threat blurred. But today, with Rex's whine still echoing in her ears, doubt settled like sand in her boots. That night, as the base lights dimmed and the hum of generators lulled the compound, she lay on her bunk, staring at the ceiling cracks. The mission ahead, rumored joint ops in unstable territory, loomed larger now, a test not just of skill, but of the soul beneath the uniform. Little did she know, the defiance had only begun. The days following the drill blurred into the relentless cadence of Fort Bragg's schedule. Reveille at 500, PT runs through the pine-scented trails where boots pounded earth in sync. Then classroom sessions on updated field protocols. Elena Vasquez moved through it all with mechanical precision, her medic's badge pinned straight on her ACU blouse, but the incident lingered like a faint bruise under her skin. Captain Harlan had logged it as a minor deviation, no formal reprimand, just a terse note in her file. Question directive during simulation. Recommend counseling on chain of command. She attended the session in a stuffy office, the air conditioner humming against the midday heat, nodding as the major droned about obedience as the foundation of unit cohesion. "Orders save lives, Sergeant," he said, his pen tapping a manila folder. "Hesitation costs them." Elena met his gaze steadily, her hands folded in her lap, fingers tracing the seam of her trousers, "Understood, sir. Won't happen again." But as she saluted and exited, the corridor's fluorescent lights buzzing overhead, she felt the weight of unspoken questions. Rex's alert hadn't been random. The child actor had wandered off script, her fear real enough to trigger the dog's response. In the field, simulations bled into reality. Civilians didn't come with rehearsals. By week's end, the unit prepped for deployment. Bravo Company was slated for a joint exercise in the Mojave, simulating humanitarian ops in a contested zone. Elena packed her kit methodically, tourniquets coiled like snakes, morphine syrettes in sterile packs, the faint chemical scent of bandages filling her duffel. Specialist Torres joined her in the supply tent, Rex at his heel, the dog's nails clicking softly on the canvas floor. "He's geared up," Torres said, securing the K9 vest with its embedded sensors. Elena glanced down, watching Rex's ears flick at a distant truck rumble. "Good boy," she murmured, more to herself than the handler. Their bond was professional, built on shared ops, where a medic's needle and a dog's nose often met at the edge of survival. The C-130 lifted off at dusk, the cargo hold vibrating with engine roar, soldiers strapped in jump seats, faces shadowed under red lights. Elena sat beside Corporal Hayes, their knees bumping with each air pocket. "Think this Mojave run's got teeth?" Hayes asked, voice low over the din. She shrugged, adjusting her harness. "Always does. He'll test us more than any sim." Ramirez, across the aisle, fidgeted with his dog tags, the metal clinking faintly. The flight stretched into night, the plane's hum lulling some to sleep, while Elena reviewed her notes on pediatric triage, rare in adult-heavy units, but protocol demanded versatility. They touched down on a dusty strip at dawn, the Mojave's dry wind whipping sand against the ramp as they deplaned. The base was austere, rows of climate-controlled tents, Humvees lined like sentinels, the air thick with the acrid bite of diesel and sun-baked earth. Captain Harlan briefed them in the ops tent, maps unrolled on a folding table, his pointer tracing simulated hot zones. "Objective: secure village perimeter. Extract non-combatants. K9 leads detection, medics handle evac." His eyes lingered on Elena a beat longer than necessary. "No deviations. Clear?" The platoon chorused. "Clear, sir," their voices echoing off the canvas walls. The first patrol launched at midday, the sun a relentless hammer overhead. Elena rode in the trail Humvee, medical ruck between her boots, radio crackling with position checks. Rex trotted alongside Torres's vehicle, nose questing the scrub brush for mock threats, planted simulants mimicking chemical residues. The terrain was unforgiving, jagged rocks underfoot, heat mirages dancing on the horizon, the distant thump of artillery practice from a neighboring range. As they approached the mock village, prefab huts clustered around a dry wadi. Hayes scanned through his scope. "Perimeter clear. No movement." But Rex alerted first. The dog froze at the wadi's edge, body rigid, a sharp bark cutting the stillness. Torres dismounted, leash taut. "Positive on anomaly, Captain. Buried cache." Harlan vectored them in, the convoy halting with engines idling low. Elena followed on foot, her boots sinking into loose gravel, the sun glinting off her shades. They crested the bank to find not a threat, but a figure, a local volunteer actor, an elderly woman collapsed against a rock, her keffiyeh askew, breathing labored. No props this time, real dehydration from the heat, her skin ashen under the relentless glare. "Medic!" Harlan called, waving Elena forward. She dropped to her knees, gloved hands assessing pulse and respirations, the woman's frail wrist thready under her fingers. "Sir, she's in distress. Needs IV fluids now." Harlan nodded curtly. "Administer and report." As Elena prepped the line, the saline bag sweating in the heat, Rex circled nearby, whining softly. Then, from the hut shadows, a smaller shape emerged. A girl, perhaps 6, clutching the woman's skirt, eyes wide with dust-caked fear. She was no actor, Word from base intel later confirmed she was the woman's granddaughter, slipped onto the site unaccounted for, drawn by the convoy's noise. The girl's gaze locked on Eleanor, her small hand reaching out as if to steady the world. "Agua," she whispered, voice cracking. Eleanor paused, needle poised, the moral pull sharpening like a blade. Protocol, treat the primary, secure the site. But the child trembled, barefoot in the dirt, her trust raw and unfiltered. Harlan's radio buzzed. "All clear, proceed to next sector." But Elena's voice cut through. "Sir, the girl's exposed. We can't leave her here." Harlan turned, face hardening in the sunlight. "Vasquez, focus. Evacs for confirmed casualties." Torres knelt beside Rex, the dog nuzzling the girl's leg gently, sensing her distress amid the chaos. The handler met Elena's eyes, a silent nod passing between them, loyalty to life over lines on a map. Ramirez hovered nearby, his rifle slung low, whispering, "Sarge, she's just a kid out here alone." The wind stirred the dust, carrying the faint scent of creosote bushes as the platoon waited. Elena's hand steadied on the IV, but her decision crystallized. Compassion wasn't defiance, it was the oath's core. She rose, scooping the girl into her arms, the child light as a ruck, clinging with surprising strength. "Captain, requesting immediate evac for both," Elena stated, voice level, the girl's head against her shoulder. Harlan's jaw set, but the witnesses were there, Hayes logging it on his notepad, Torres radioing the K9 all clear. The order hung, tested again, the Mojave's vast silence amplifying the fracture. What started as a routine patrol now teetered on revelation, the chain of command bending under the weight of one small, trusting voice. Back at base that evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the tents in ochre, Elena debriefed in the medical bay. The woman stabilized, fluids dripping steadily, while the girl, named Aisha, translators later revealed, sat on a cot, sipping water from a canteen, her eyes never leaving Elena. "Mama," she murmured once, the words slipping out like a secret, twisting something deep in the medic's chest. Harlan's report would note the delay, but the ripple had begun. Whispers in the chow line, a handler's quiet respect. The mission's true test lay ahead, where silence and sacrifice would forge an unbreakable bond. The tension in the ops tent thickened like the Mojave dust settling on every surface, the air conditioner straining against the evening's residual heat. Captain Harlan paced the narrow space between the folding table and the canvas walls, his boots scuffing the grit-strewn floor. Maps and after-action logs lay scattered, illuminated by the harsh glow of a single bulb swinging faintly overhead. Elena Vasquez stood at attention with the rest of the patrol team, Torres beside her, Rex sitting obediently at his feet. The dog's flanks rising and falling in quiet rhythm. Specialist Ramirez shifted his weight, the creak of his chair the only sound breaking the silence as Harlan reviewed the footage from the helmet cams. "Replay the Wadi sequence," Harlan ordered, his voice clipped, nodding to the tech specialist at the laptop. The screen flickered to life, grainy video capturing the patrol's approach. Humvees grinding over rocks, Rex's alert bark slicing through the static, Elena dropping to her knees beside the elderly woman. The footage rolled on, the IV setup, the girl's emergence from the shadows, Aisha's small hand clutching at Elena's sleeve. Then the pivotal moment, Elena rising, the child in her arms, her clear request for evac echoing in the tinny audio. "Requesting immediate evac for both, sir." Harlan paused the video, the frozen image of Elena's determined face staring back at them. "Sergeant Vasquez, explain the deviation." His eyes bored into hers, the weight of command room protocol pressing down. Elena kept her posture rigid, hands clasped behind her back, the faint scent of antiseptic still clinging to her uniform from the medical bay. Sir, the girl was unaccompanied and exposed to environmental hazards. Protocol 7-2 on non-combatant welfare required assessment and extraction to prevent escalation. She spoke evenly, drawing from the field manual she'd memorized years ago. But inside, the echo of Aisha's mama lingered, a vulnerability she buried deep. Torres cleared his throat subtly, Rex's ear twitching at the sound. Captain, Rex's response corroborated the priority. The dog flagged distress, not threat, consistent with handler logs. Harlan's gaze flicked to the K9 specialist, then back. Noted, but the primary objective was perimeter security. Your actions delayed sector clearance by 14 minutes. Ramirez, seated nearby, kept his eyes on the floor, his fingers tracing the edge of his knee pad. The room felt smaller, the hum of the generator outside underscoring the scrutiny. Hayes, ever the steady presence, added quietly, "Sir, the locals confirmed the woman and girl were off-grid volunteers. No intel breach, but it could have gone south without the evac." The debrief stretched into the night, questions probing like reconnaissance. Why override the initial order? What risks to the team? Elena answered methodically, her voice a measured cadence honed from countless reports. Pulse rates, hydration levels, the girl's minor abrasions treated with antibiotic ointment. But Harlan's final directive landed heavy. "Vasquez, you're sidelined from lead medic duties until review. Report to base command for formal inquiry upon return." He dismissed them with a curt nod. The tent flap rustling as they filed out into the cooling desert air, stars pricking the vast black sky above. Outside, the base stirred with the low murmur of night routines, sentries pacing floodlit perimeters, the distant whine of a generator kicking in. Elena walked Torres to the K9 kennel, Rex trotting between them, his paws padding softly on the packed sand. The enclosure smelled of straw and polished leather, floodlights casting long shadows across the chain link. "You did right by her," Torres said low, unclipping Rex's lead and filling his water bowl, the splash echoing in the quiet. Elena leaned against the fence, the metal cool under her palms. Orders are orders, but that girl, she wasn't part of the script. Rex lapped steadily, then nudged her hand with his muzzle, a brief warmth of fur against skin, trust earned in silence. Sleep came fitfully in the barracks tent, the canvas walls fluttering with each gust, Eleanor's cot creaking as she turned. Dreams fragmented, the girl's wide eyes merging with faces from past deployments, Rex's whine blending with radio static. Dawn broke with the sharp blast of reveille, bugle notes carrying over the dunes, pulling the unit back into motion. PT run first, boots thudding in formation along the airstrip, sweat beading under helmets as the sun climbed. Elena ran mid-pack, her breaths controlled, ignoring the sidelong glances from Ramirez and Hayes. "Heard commands pulling strings," Hayes muttered during the cool-down stretch, his voice barely above the wind. "Might go up the chain." The day's ops shifted without her at point, a secondary patrol to map fallback routes, Torres and Rex leading the scent line through thorny scrub. Elena assisted from the rear, logging vitals on the trailing medic, her radio clipped silent on her shoulder, but the ripple spread. During midday chow in the mess tent, trays clattering with foil packets of beef stew, the air thick with steam and chatter. A translator approached, her uniform crisp. "Sergeant Vasquez, the girl, Aisha, she asks for you. Says the soldier mama helped her abuela." Elena paused, spoon midway to her mouth, the words landing like an unexpected alert. "She's stable." The translator nodded. "Both are, but the grandmother wants to thank the team." The permission came grudgingly from Harlan, a radioed approval laced with caution. Elena made her way to the aid station, a prefab unit humming with fluorescent lights and the beep of monitors. Aisha sat cross-legged on a bunk, bandaged knee propped on a pillow, her ragdoll clutched tight. The elderly woman, Maria, the translator, had said, lay nearby, IV stand casting a shadow. As Elena entered, the girl's face lit and she slid down, bare feet hitting the linoleum with a soft pat. "Mama," Aisha said again, the word clear and unhesitating, her arms wrapping around Elena's legs in a hug that defied protocol. Elena knelt, her medic's kit forgotten at her side, the child's warmth seeping through her fatigues. "I'm Elena," she said gently, voice steady despite the knot in her throat. "You're safe now." Maria reached out a frail hand from her cot, murmuring thanks in halting English, eyes conveying gratitude deeper than words. Outside, the patrol convoy rumbled past, dust clouds billowing, but in that moment the hierarchy blurred. The bond forged not in orders, but in the quiet act of presence. Rex, waiting with Torres at the door, tilted his head, sensing the shift. His tail giving a single wag. Word travelled fast through the base grapevine, the medic who bent rules for a kid, the dog who knew first. By evening formation, under the parade ground's arc lights, Harlan addressed the platoon, his silhouette sharp against the glow. "Incidents like today's test our discipline, but they also remind us why we serve." His eyes met Elena's briefly, a flicker of something unreadable, respect perhaps, or warning. Whispers persisted in the ranks, a handler's log entry noting Rex's instinctive welfare alert, and Ramirez sketching the scene in his journal under flashlight glow. As the unit bedded down, the Mojave wind sighing through guy wires, Elena sat outside her tent, staring at the horizon where distant flares marked artillery ranges. The inquiry loomed, a tribunal back at Bragg that could strip rank or reassign her to stateside duty. Yet Aisha's voice echoed, a counterpoint to the chain's unyielding pull. Loyalty wasn't just to command, it was to the lives it shielded, fragile as a child's trust. The mission pressed on, but the defiance had taken root, promising a reckoning that would echo beyond the sands. The inquiry back at Fort Bragg unfolded in a windowless conference room, deep within the post headquarters, its walls panelled in scuffed oak that absorbed the low hum of the ventilation system. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting a sterile pallor on the long oak table, where folders lay stacked like ammunition crates. Sergeant Elena Vasquez sat at one end, her dress uniform pressed to regulation sharpness, the faint scent of shoe polish mingling with the room's stale coffee aroma. Across from her, the presiding major adjusted his glasses, flanked by two colonels from JAG, Joint Advocate General, their stars glinting under the lights like distant warning flares. Captain Harlan stood at parade rest near the door, his face a mask of neutral authority, while Specialist Torres waited in the antechamber with Rex, the dog's presence a quiet anchor beyond the threshold. "State your name and rank for the record," the major intoned, his voice echoing slightly off the walls as a stenographer's keys clicked in rhythmic punctuation. Elena straightened, her hands flat on the table, the cool wood grounding her. "Sergeant Elena Vasquez, United States Army Medical Corps, Bravo Company, 82nd Airborne Division." The questions began methodically, probing the Mojave Patrol like a post-mission autopsy. Timelines cross-referenced with GPS logs, helmet cam footage replayed on a projector that flickered shadows across their faces. Harlan's testimony came first, delivered in clipped tones. "The sergeant deviated from the primary objective, sir. Perimeter security was compromised for an unauthorized evac, delaying the team and exposing assets to potential risks." Elena listened without flinching, her gaze fixed on the grain of the table. Memories of the wadi's heat resurfacing, the grit in Aisha's hair, the child's small fingers curling into her sleeve. When her turn came, she recounted the sequence with surgical precision, vital signs on the elderly woman, environmental hazards to the girl, the field manual's subsection on civilian welfare in contested zones. "The decision aligned with oath-bound priorities, sir. No lives were lost, and the extraction prevented escalation." One colonel leaned forward, his pen tapping a notepad. "And the child's attachment to you. Reports indicate she referred to you as Mama. How does that factor into operational judgment?" Elena paused, the word hanging in the air like radio static, her throat tightening briefly. "It was a mistranslation, sir. Cultural context in the moment. My focus remained on medical necessity." The door creaked open midway through, admitting a liaison from Base Public Affairs, her tablet glowing with incoming alerts. "Sirs, this may impact the proceedings." She projected a news clip onto the screen, a local Mojave outlet, grainy footage of the aid station where Elena had knelt with Aisha. The girl's voice, dubbed in English, carried clear, "The soldier Mama saved us." The story had leaked, volunteers talking, a translator's offhand comment to a reporter at the airstrip. Harlan's jaw tightened imperceptibly, the room's temperature seeming to rise as the clip rolled, showing Rex nosing gently at Aisha's side, the dog's instinctive calm a counterpoint to the unfolding drama. "Media's framing it as a feel-good rescue," the liaison continued. "But Command's concerned about optics, unauthorized actions in a joint exercise." The colonels conferred in low murmurs, the major's fingers drumming the table. "This elevates beyond internal review. We'll reconvene with higher input." Elena saluted as they adjourned, her boots echoing in the corridor as she exited, the weight of scrutiny settling like a rucksack after a long march. Outside, the autumn sun filtered through pine branches, casting dappled light on the sidewalk where Torres waited, Rex's leash taut in his hand. The dog rose as she approached, tail wagging once in recognition, his warm breath puffing against her knee. "Heard the buzz," Torres said quietly, falling into step beside her as they walked toward the K9 training fields. The air carried the crisp bite of fallen needles, mingled with the distant crack of rifle fire from the range. "Rex picked up on your stress from a mile out, sat by the fence whining till I brought him." Elena managed a faint nod, her patrol cap shading her eyes. "It's not just the inquiry, that word, Mama, it's sticking." They reached the fields, where handlers drilled with their units, commands barked sharp, dogs weaving through obstacle courses with fluid grace, their coats rippling in the breeze. Rex strained toward a scent line, but Torres held him back, settling on a bench overlooking the grass. "Bonds form fast out there," he said, scratching behind the dog's ears, the fur soft and warm. "Like him and me, or you and that girl. Doesn't make it wrong, just human." Elena sat, watching a young handler correct his Malinois with a firm sit, the dog's immediate compliance a model of trust earned through repetition. Her own career flashed in fragments, deployments where she'd patched wounds under fire, the silent loyalty of teams holding formation. Yet this fracture felt personal, the chain of Command's rigidity clashing with the raw pulse of compassion. Word of the media story rippled through the base by evening chow, soldiers clustered in the mess hall under the clamor of trays and silverware, the steam from vats of spaghetti rising like battlefield smoke. Private Ramirez slid into the seat across from her, his eyes wide. "Sarge, you're trending on that vet forum. They call it the Mojave Miracle. You, the kid, the dog." Hayes joined them, forking his meal with deliberate motions. "Harlan's pissed, says it's undermining discipline." Elena pushed her tray aside, appetite dulled by the fluorescent glare. "It's not about me. It's about what happens when protocol meets reality." Outside, as dusk fell and floodlights hummed to life, a small crowd gathered near the flagpole. Handlers off duty, a few medics murmuring about the clip circulating on phones. Rex, kennelled nearby, let out a soft woof, as if sensing the shift in the air. The next morning brought escalation, a summons to the commandant's office, where Brigadier General Lang awaited, his desk piled with printouts of the news articles, the room smelling of polished leather and fresh ink. Harlan stood at attention beside him, while Elena reported as ordered, her salute crisp. "Sergeant, your actions have drawn eyes from the Pentagon," Lang said, his voice gravelly from years of briefings. Positive press, but it questions our training efficacy. Explain. She did, voice steady, emphasizing Rex's alert as the initial flag. Torres's corroboration, the manual's guidelines. The general listened, steepling his fingers, the tick of a wall clock marking the silence. Compassion's a strength, Vasquez, but in the field, it's a liability if it overrides orders. Still, the girl's family reached out through channels. Gratitude, they say, and that dog's log, impeccable. As she left, the base stirred with routine. Trucks rumbling along supply roads, the sharp tang of diesel cutting the morning mist. But the whispers had evolved, respect threading through the ranks, a quiet acknowledgement in salutes held a fraction longer. Torres met her at the medical clinic, Rex harnessed for a routine health check, the dog's nails clicking on the tile. Heard the generals leaning toward commendation, he murmured, as Elena ran a gloved hand over the Malinois' flanks, listening to his steady heartbeat. Your call saved more than lives. It showed the system's got heart. Aisha's face flickered in her mind, the child's trust a beacon amid the scrutiny. By afternoon, the public reckoning crested in a base-wide memo read over the intercom during lunch formation. Recent Mojave exercise highlights the balance of duty and humanity. Sergeant Vasquez's initiative under review for exemplary conduct. Soldiers paused in their lines, boots shifting on the gravel, the wind rustling flags overhead. Harlan caught her eye across the quad, a nod passing, grudging but real. The fracture hadn't broken the chain, it had reinforced it. Loyalty extending beyond ranks to the fragile lives they guarded. As the sun arced westward, casting long shadows over the parade ground, Elena walked Rex through the pines, the dog's pace matching hers, a silent partnership forging ahead. The mission's echo lingered, promising reform not in grand gestures, but in the disciplined choice to bend toward right. The weeks following the inquiry settled over Fort Bragg like the steady patter of autumn rain on tent roofs, washing away the dust of scrutiny, but leaving behind a subtle sheen of change. Sergeant Elena Vasquez returned to her duties with the medical detachment, her schedule recalibrated, morning rounds in the clinic where the sharp scent of iodine and fresh linens filled the air, followed by afternoon drills integrating canine welfare protocols into triage simulations. The Brigadier General's final ruling had come via encrypted memo. No demotion, but a formal commendation for exemplary initiative in non-combatant care, coupled with a directive to co-author updated field guidelines on civilian encounters. Harlan had signed off without comment. His signature a crisp line on the page, though in passing formations, his salute carried an extra measure of precision, as if acknowledging the shift. Elena's days wove into the unit's rhythm once more, but the Mojave incident had etched itself into the base's collective memory. During PT runs along the wooded trails, where pine needles crunched under boots and breaths fogged in the crisp air, Ramirez no longer whispered doubts. Instead, he asked questions about pediatric protocols, his notebook filled with annotations from her briefings. "Sarge, how'd you know to prioritize the kid?" he'd say, jogging to keep pace, sweat beading on his brow. Elena would respond evenly, her voice cutting through the wind. Listen to the signs, vitals, environment, even the dog's read. It's all connected. Hayes, ever the anchor, shared stories from his own deployments over evening chow in the mess tent, the clatter of trays underscoring his words. Seen medics bend rules before. Most get chewed out. You're the one they talk about now. The reform took shape quietly, in procedural tweaks that rippled through Bravo Company and beyond. Elena's input shaped a new addendum to the field manual, instinctive alerts in mixed scenarios, crediting K9 responses as equal to human assessment in welfare calls. Torres reviewed the draft with her in the K9 annex. Rex sprawled at their feet on the cool concrete floor, his chest rising steadily as he dozed. The handler's eyes scanned the pages under the fluorescent hum, nodding approval. "This gives us cover," he said, folding the document. "Rex's nose isn't just for threats anymore, it's for the whole picture." The dog stirred at his name, lifting his head to nudge Elena's boot, his warm muzzle a brief affirmation. She scratched behind his ears, absently, the fur soft against her fingers, the bond between medic, handler, and animal solidifying like reinforced webbing. Word from the Mojave volunteers arrived via official channels a month later. A letter from Aisha's family, translated and framed in the commandant's outer office. The paper crinkled faintly as Elena read it during a quiet shift, the clinic's clock ticking softly. Gratitude for the soldier who saw us as family, with a pressed wildflower tucked inside, its faint creosote scent evoking the desert's edge. Aisha had drawn a picture on the back, a stick-figure woman in uniform holding a girl and a dog, labeled in childish script, "Mama, Elena, and Rex." The major overseeing the clinic paused in the doorway, his coffee mug steaming. "Keepsake?" he asked, voice gruff but kind. Elena folded it carefully into her pocket. "Reminder, sir, why we train the way we do." The public reckoning extended beyond the base when the story broke wider, picked up by military outlets and a PBS special on service animals in humanitarian ops. Elena declined interviews at first, her response to the public affairs officer terse. "The team's work, not mine." But during a joint briefing with the 82nd's leadership, General Lang pulled her aside in his office, the room lined with maps and commendation plaques glinting in the afternoon light. "Vasquez, this isn't just your win, it's the Army's. We're rolling out the protocol Army-wide, K9 integration in medevac training. You lead the pilot here." His handshake was firm, calloused from years in the field, sealing her role not as outlier, but exemplar. Back with the platoon, the transformation unfolded in small, disciplined ways. During a weekend exercise simulating urban extraction, Eleanor directed the team through a revised scenario. Actors, including child civilians, Rex, and 2 other Malinois clearing paths, while medics assessed in tandem. Harlan observed from the command post, radio in hand, his updates lacking the edge of before. Formation solid, welfare checks integrated, good. As the sun dipped low, casting golden hues over the mock structures, Aisha's drawing slipped from Elena's mind to the team's shared lore, mentioned in handler briefings as a case study in empathy under orders. Ramirez, now confident in his role, assisted with a young actor's prop injury, his hands steady where once they'd trembled. "Like you taught, Sarge. Eyes on the whole scene." That evening, as the base quieted under a canopy of stars, Elena walked the perimeter trail alone, the gravel crunching softly under her boots, the distant hum of helicopters fading into night. Rex had been kennelled after the drill, but his presence lingered in her thoughts, the unwavering loyalty that mirrored her own. The cost of integrity had been the inquiry's glare, the sidelined days, but the yield was deeper. A system refined, careers nudged toward compassion, the chain of command flexible without breaking. She paused at an overlook, the Fort Bragg lights twinkling below like grounded constellations, and felt the weight lift, not gone, but shared. In the months that followed, Elena mentored new medics, her lessons laced with the Mojave's lessons, duty as a shield for humanity, not a cage. The little girl's word, Mama, had unlocked something unspoken, a legacy of quiet courage that echoed in salutes, in dogs' alert whines, in orders given with conscience in mind. The Army, rigid as ever, had learned to bend, proving that true strength lay in the disciplined heart. Subscribe for more stories of loyalty, courage, and justice within the ranks. Thank you for watching the case of She Never Spoke About the Mission, Until the Little Girl Called Her Mom. See you in the next one. In the end, loyalty proved the truest command, binding soldiers, dogs, and the lives they saved in an unbreakable line.